Okay, it is the top of the hour, and I want to welcome everybody to our Q&A today. My name is Evelyn Rysdyk, and I'd like to start with us just coming together as a group. We're spread all over the country, in fact, beyond the borders of this country. And so let's just take a breath together, creating community just for this time. And then hopefully that community begins to weave us ever closer to a global community. So I welcome you, and I'm thrilled that you took time out of your day to come and play. And I have a few of your questions. And I'm going to do a general question first because I've actually had this a couple of times come in. And that is, do I need to have experience with shamanic journeying to take this class? And the answer is no, and. So no, because I will be guiding you through all of the ceremonies and all of the shamanic journeys. So you can just follow along and have that experience. The and part is, if you do know how to journey, I highly recommend that you redo those journeys on your own, because guiding them, I can provide an experience, but it may not be as unique to you as it could be working with your own spirits in your own journey. So I don't think it's any less powerful, but there may be specific things that you get from the spirits that you know and trust that would augment the journey in a way that you might not have in just the guided journey. So it's a yes, you don't need any experience prior to the program together. But if you do have shamanic journey experience, I highly recommend you journey again on what we do, excuse me, and that you find a way to deepen whatever the experiences are that you have in the class, each episode of our class, each session, with the spirits that you know and love and trust, and who know and love you. Because they're very good about tailoring questions to fit us, and tailoring their answers to fit us. We have a student that once told us she thought of journeys as being formatted for our screen. So the spirits have a way to work with us with our unique way of seeing the world, because every one of us is very different. And to have an opportunity to get that kind of wisdom that is so personalized is something that you have an opportunity to do if you already know how to journey on your own. And for those of you who are just dipping your toe into journeying, there is a handout on the very basics of shamanic journeying. You can always find more information, in fact, a step-by-step in my book, Spirit Walking, A Course in Shamanic Power. And one of your bonuses is my shamanic drumming CD. It has several tracks. The first one is a introduction track. It's me whistling and rattling, and you can use that time to get clear about what your question might be, the intent of your journey, or help create sacred space for yourself. Then you have a second track, which is an hour's worth of journeying. You don't have to use the entire hour, because the last track you can jump to is the callback signal. There's also a bonus track I provided, which is the journey drumming and a callback in about a 20-minute recording, so that you can put that on your phone and journey anywhere. So that is the long explanation for, do I really need to know how to journey to take the class? And the answer is no. But again, you can augment your experience if you do know how to journey. I'm going to have a sip of tea. It's windy here today where I am. And because it has been so dry here, there's a lot of dust blowing around. And my throat doesn't like dust, apparently. So I'm going to answer some of these questions that came in via the email. And this one was a bit of a long one, so hold on for a minute. And this is from Anita. And Anita, if you're out there, this is your question. I might paraphrase a bit of it. Anita has an ancestral helping spirit altar that she has home. She tends to it daily. And she's planning to create another sacred space or altar space specifically for the new spirits she meets in this program. And she's asked, in my experience, is it necessary to make offerings of food and drink to the spirits by placing them on the altar or sacred space? She says, I have heard some shamanic teachers say it's important to make offerings, food or drink, and I've heard others say that the spirits do not ask or require such offerings. And so I would answer that in this way. Ceremonies, offering ceremonies, are something that benefits both us and the spirits. So yes, the spirits don't require actual food or drink. They will receive the spirits of what you offer on your sacred space or on your altar, but they don't actually eat, or they don't have physical bodies, right? So you are making an offering of gratitude to the spirits by feeding them. That has a dual effect. Yes, the spirits get it now that you care for them, that you are in a place of reciprocity with them, that they provide guidance or protection, they support you in your life, and in return, you are taking care of them as if they were family. Maybe better than family for some people. But the other part of ceremonies, and particularly offering ceremonies, is that you are telegraphing to your subconscious. When you do an offering like that, a concrete offering of a substance, water, food, you may put cornmeal out on the land, whatever it might be, you are telegraphing to your subconscious that you are feeding someone that is real. And that's important because when the hard times come in life, you want to be so connected to those spirits that are protective, that can provide guidance, that can provide healing, can provide insight depending on what's going on in your life. You have different spirits for different things. You want to have that connection feel so solid in your body. Not that it's an intellectual construct or something that is, it kind of comes and goes for you. The action of doing ceremony in that way, where you are providing food or drink, that you are setting time aside to care for those beings in the same way that you would care for people that you love. That teaches you on a subconscious level, beneath our ordinary awareness, that you are in relationship with these beings, even though you can't see them. I know some people can. They're rare people that can actually see spirits with their eyes open. I am not one of them. In order to see spirits, I have to close my eyes, or better yet, blindfold them. So teaching yourself so that it's in your bones, it's in your sinews, it's part of your wiring, that these beings are real, that they're tangible, and that they are invested in you, changes how your life flows. I know we get a lot of questions from people around, and this is in our private practice, around, well, you know, I forgot to ask for help, or they were having some struggle. They had a loved one go to the hospital or something, and I didn't know what to do. I didn't feel like I could journey, and they were upset, of course. And what I have found, and what people who have made their spirits tangible in their life, is you don't have a sense of their absence when the hard stuff comes along in life. And hard stuff always happens. Somebody gets sick, you have an accident, you lose your job, whatever it might be. We all have hard times. And when we have made that connection so solid that it's woven into our sinew, it's woven into our bones, we know those beings are real. Hear the underline, real, in our lives, that we then can depend upon those connections when we need them most. I'll use a little example. My partner, Allie, many of you know her. She had to go to the hospital fairly recently. We both got COVID, and she had to go into the hospital for a week. And because of the medication she was on, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was getting unpleasant hallucinations. And what she felt unwaveringly were the spirits that cared for her being present. In fact, it was a spirit that we share. It's actually my great-great-grandmother sat on the edge of her bed, and she felt that spirit's presence the whole time she was in the hospital. And that was tremendously comforting because, you know, due to COVID, you don't get visitors. Due to COVID, you don't even see the faces of the people that are caring for you. But she could tell, she could feel that presence that she had been honoring and interacting with for so many years. So that is kind of a long answer to your question, Anita, but I feel that it's important to make our offerings tangible. It doesn't have to be elaborate. You can give a tiny little plate with a little bit of food or a little thing of water. You can make offerings outside to the spirits of nature. I use cornmeal quite often. And this time of year, you know, we decorate our doorways quite often in North America with cobs of corn, dried corn that are the multicolored ones. And we hang them on the door, you know, at harvest time. And after that comes down and I put up a wreath for Yule, I strip the corn off those cobs. And I save it in a jar, and that's something else I put out for offerings, because even when it's really dry, the blue jays love it. So I save that as another offering. I also save the needles from our Yule tree. When we take the Yule tree down, I have needles then that I can use for an incense offering. You can put it on charcoal and make that kind of an offering. So find ways to weave that into your life for purpose of caring for the spirits who care for you, first of all, and secondarily to begin to weave that connection into you so keenly that you can really depend on it when the hard times come. So I'll move on now. So here is another question, and actually it's pertaining to hard times. So this is from Catherine, and I'll read her question because I think it probably echoes a lot of what's going on in your life. How can I have faith and be able to lean into or soften into trust? I'm at a low level of terrified 24/7 between, and I won't use the word, but between our current government and COVID-19, which also is affecting her finances, as with many of you, leading to terror. So how do you trust when you're terrified? And that is an excellent question, I have to say. And I'm glad she used the word trust, first of all, because some people say, well, I don't have faith and I don't have trust, and they kind of confuse the two. And I like to say trust comes from experience. Faith is what you have based on your inner guidance, the guidance that you have with the spirits. You develop a sense of faith. And that curtain moving is my cat leaving. Trust is what you develop. Trust is kind of like a muscle. Trust is what you develop through experience. So I would say you might not have trust now, but extend yourself into faith. And it's an extension, it's a choice, it's an intent. And then through experience, see what happens to your level of trust. We don't wave a magic wand and suddenly have trust. And we mistake that because there's some people who won't, you know, they won't extend themselves in the world. They won't take a risk because they can't, well, I can't trust that that'll be okay. Well, no, you can't trust it because you haven't had that experience yet. But you can have faith in yourself and your skills and the relationships that you've built with the spirits to extend your foot and step onto the path. I always recall that wonderful, the third Indiana Jones movie. Indiana Jones, I think in The Last Crusade. And as part of the plot, Indiana Jones has to follow this path that's been laid out for him. And there's a section where a man of faith can make it to the next step. And I would say a woman of faith too. But when you look, there's nothing between, there's a yawing void between you and where you have to go. And that's a wonderful metaphor for life, by the way. There's always a yawing void. We like to think we know what's going to happen next, but we really don't. There's always that great expanse between us and what happens in the future. And in the story, he sees a diagram of what looks like this person floating on air, and he goes, oh, I have to do this because in the plot he has to save his father, right? So what he does is take a deep breath, close his eyes, and he steps forward into what in all of his body is telling him is going to be his death. And his feet land on a path. And that really is what faith offers us. It offers us courage. And we build the courage inside of ourselves through our interactions with the spirits. And by the way, always invoke your ancestors when you're about to embark on something that terrifies you. You're going for a new job, you're taking a risk in a new relationship, whatever it might be, because different things terrify different people. Whenever you're in that place, in fact, I do this every day anyway, but especially when you're in those places, think for a moment about your ancestors. And if the recent ones weren't to your pleasure, imagine one 500 years ago and the challenges they might have faced in their lives. And just ask them for their support. And then move ahead with that faith. You will do better, believe it or not, by invoking the ancestors, just by thinking of them, than someone who doesn't. They've proven this with research in Europe. The Psychological Association in Europe did a whole series of tests in scientific method with control groups, and there was a whole range of different kinds of variations of the test. And what they found out is people that think about their ancestors before taking problem solving and intelligence tests, which are scientific ways of letting you know how well you do the earth plane stuff, they did statistically better than people who did not think about their ancestors, or who maybe thought about people that love them that are alive. The people who thought about their ancestors did statistically better. So if you're on the edge of terror based on all the stuff that's going on right now, you're afraid of going bankrupt because you can't work because of COVID, you're afraid of getting sick, you're terrified about the next election, whatever it might be, start to do work with your ancestors. And the program that we're going to be working with is really talking about working with a kind of spiritual ancestor for all of us in lots of different forms. But I want you to think about your own ancestors as well, because they can support you in ways that you can't really put a handle on. And yet somehow it works to make us do our earth plane stuff better. It gives us that extra boost. So I would say to you, Catherine, think about that leap of faith. Don't worry that you don't yet trust, because trust is a muscle that you build. Have faith, invoke your ancestors. If you have helping and healing spirits that you work with, deepen your relationships with them. Do your journeys, do your meditations, make offerings to them. Spend time also in nature. Get out into nature, even if it's only on your porch. Get out into the air, get out under the sky if you can, watch the birds. Remember that in spite of all the turmoil in the human world, nature is still doing what nature has to do. Yes, having to adapt based on all of the destruction that we have put forth. But nature continues in some form or another. And that continuity, because we are part of nature, that continuity can stiffen the steel in us. Stiffen the steel in us to take a step when it feels like it's impossible to do so. So I wish you good faith and courage, along with the rest of us. So I have some other questions that have come in around the class in general, because I know there are quite a few of you that haven't yet signed up for the class, our course together, our 9-week course. And there was a question from at least 2 individuals wondering if it really is possible to make a difference. So I heard in that the sound of despair. And you know, these are times where despair comes up for certain. Despair is right, you know, you don't have to scratch too far to find despair in there, because there's signs of it everywhere. But I guarantee that when you call for the support that you require and ask for the healing that you need to be able to be fully in the world, that alone makes a difference. It's really important to know that. Shamans all around the world, indigenous shamans, yes, they do healing work, but the most important work that they do is right here. The work that they do internally, they know will be reflected outside of themselves. So if fear is rampant outside around you, then it's time to do healing for your own fears. If there is discord all around you, it means you need to work on the aspects of the self that are not yet in harmony. And so, and so forth. I mean, anything that you can think of that is happening externally, we have a doorway to work with that by dealing with whatever it is that's going on inside of us. Balance and harmony is something that shamans are always working on. But the doorway that you go through has to be the one that you have the greatest sphere of influence over. And that doorway is the self. I shut off my mic, you didn't need to hear that. So that doorway of the self it's a sacred place. You know, we tend to dismiss our own inner environment. And that inner environment is something that needs to be tended to with as much care and attention as is possible, with as much love as what you can muster. Loving the self is kind of a heretical act, a completely heretical act in our culture. Even though it's a kind of me culture, it's me until it comes to loving me. And really, if you think about yourself as that doorway, if you want to have a more loving experience outside, it has to happen inside. If you want to see more balance and harmony outside, it needs to happen inside. If you want to see a culture that honors the divine feminine, it has to be strong inside. It has to be healed inside. And so thinking about yourself is kind of a laboratory. It makes personal work feel less onerous. You know, when you realize, oh, there's a bigger purpose than just fixing me, right? Because we tend to get into the, oh, I'm being selfish, I'm still working on myself. You know, we tend to where. That's a common human experience. But the truth of the matter is, there is no more important thing that you can be doing to clear the way for what you want to see outside than dealing with, in a loving way, being supported to deal with it by working with a teacher, working with the spirits that love you, working with your ancestors, working on this laboratory of the self to produce that state where you can get into balance and harmony more and more easily. Just imagine what the culture would be if people were able to self-regulate, if they got angry and were able to do repair so they could bring their full mind back online. Imagine that. Instead of everybody in their sort of lowest experience of selves, where they're coming from that place of fear of lack, fear of other. There's a lot of fear of other being bandied about right now. And usually when people get afraid, then they have to sort of blame somebody for it. And instead, imagine if everybody did that inner work, worked inside the laboratory. I don't mean inner work like pick an axe. I mean, going inside, if I'm seeing this reflected outside of myself, let me see what's cooking inside. and then working in the laboratory to refine and heal, again, with the support of the spirits who know you and love you. And then you're able to go forward with more faith, more trust also, because you have built that in that process. And it guarantees a kind of buoyancy. You know, you'll still sway in the wind. You know, life is going to provide gales, and you're going to be swaying in the wind. You know, that's the nature of life. But you don't have to get blown over. You can go, you know, like we have birch trees here in New England that when we have an ice storm, they will bend all the way over and touch the ground and freeze that way. And then the ice melts and the birch tree is still bent like this for a while. And then finally the birch tree, as the sap starts to run in the spring, the birch tree starts to make its way up again, and then it's okay. But to look at it in the winter when it's frozen over and its branches are glued to the ground with ice, you think that birch tree is just not going to make it. It has taken too big a hit. And yet, lo and behold, nature finds a way. So let's read what else we have on our list here. So somebody else asked, you know, reading what we wrote about the class and our in our description of kind of what we're going to be working with, and they wanted to know if those sacred feminine archetypes that we're going to be working with in the form of these Norse goddesses can really do anything to release the negative kind of ancestral feminine pattern that we have. And I would argue, yes. I would argue that because we'll be doing it in the shamanic context, and shamanic work is based in making changes in the physical world. Yes, you go through the doorway of spirit, but you are doing things for practical purposes. Shamans of old didn't journey because it would be fun to do that around the fire at night and like everybody share your experience. They did it because there were problems of survival that could not be addressed using ordinary methods. There were things that were beyond being able to reach with your ordinary senses because they were outside of either the space in which you lived or could access easily, or they were in the future. They were outside of the time that you were able to access. And being able to get information, get guidance from the spirits to support survival, because our deep ancestors, for much, much longer than we've been farmers and then industrialists and then post-industrialists, they were hunters and gatherers. They depended upon the seasons. They depended on the migrations of game, the migrations of fish. They depended on that for food. And they also lived in times that are so close to what we are going to experience from here forward, where predictable weather patterns were not available. Our ancestors, even as short as 12,000 years ago, were dealing with tremendous climate shifts because of the ending of the Ice Age. They would have experienced tundra going into field and forest and back again, sometimes once or twice in a lifetime. Now, when a climate changes that much, it means the species change, because species are keyed to certain habitats. So if you're in a tundra, you're going to see different food stuff than you would see in the field and forest. Now, if you only lived to your 30s, you might not remember in your lifetime what the previous shift was like. You might not have elders. You might not have an elder that remembered. How would you find food? How would you find shelter when the landscape around you had completely changed? Your usual migration route had changed. And that's when they would depend upon the shaman. Yes, of course, they would watch the game and watch the patterns that they had changed in their migrations and what have you, but there was so much of a change. They needed to have that extra support. So Shamanism and working with these beings that we can't see with our physical eyes, or these spirits that we'll be working with in the course that we may not have any awareness of, they can support us to make changes here where it counts. Here in the physical world, they're here to support us. And indeed, they want to work with us. You know, it's kind of like, I can liken it to how many of you might feel disconnected from people that you care about. And you can't really stay in touch in the way you usually do. Because there's only so many hours of Zoom you can do a day, right? Imagine what it was like even 40 years ago, where it was, you'd have to make 50 years ago, where it would be, you'd have to arrange to make a call to somebody far away. Imagine in your parents' childhoods, maybe it was just a party line, and it would have to be several steps if their loved ones were far away. Imagine before telephone, what that would have been like. So that having that feeling of disconnection is so painful. And when we work with the spirits and develop that connection, we, yes, have reassurance. We have a sense that we've got support out there, even if we can't touch them. We can't hug our support right now, right? We can't embrace the people that we care about. But we know they're out there. And we can call them on FaceTime and have a Zoom meeting with them. And it's not quite the same as being physically there, just as it is with the spirits. They can't put their arms around you and you can't feel the hug, but they are there to support you. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference in how we do life. They help us to heal those things that we haven't been able to get a handle on. They help to heal those things that happened way before we were born that we experienced the result of. You know, the patriarchal cultural patterns that we live with that are really quite stunningly obvious right now in our culture, they started 8,000 to 10,000 years ago. And that pattern is then been passed down. And so we're at the effect of people that have had this kind of broken sense passed down over generations. But we have the capacity to then go, you know what? I want to do something about that. Again, working with the sphere of greatest influence, I want to change that paradigm inside myself. And as we change the paradigm inside ourselves, we are different in the world. Not obviously different, maybe, but we behave a little differently. We think differently. We respond differently. And that begins to change the culture. Remember, culture is a whole bunch of individuals. And as we transform ourselves as individuals, the culture around us changes. Our immediate culture of family and friends begins to shift. Probably friends more than families. Families tend to shift more slowly. And we respond differently to things happening in our community, and we respond differently to how we raise our voice when something is important to us, and respond differently at work, and claim our voice in a way that can be heard, and claim what is ours, not in a way that is disruptive, but from that place of being so solid inside. You know, oftentimes when we're in a wobbly place inside, it's like we have to leap over the barricade before we use our voice on our behalf. And people hear that. Maybe not aware of it consciously, but they hear that we're having to go over a hurdle. And people who do hear it will pay attention and know, oh, that may not be your bottom line. I hear the wobble. You know that this has happened to you with your peers and certainly in business. But when you are so clear that your response requires no force, Your response is completely clean, clear, energetically focused. There's no wobble. And when we don't have the wobble, we don't have that vulnerability to being easily dismissed. When we are able to feel all of our feelings and know how to work with them, how to repair the ones that are disruptive to us, how to work with them so that we can be in the world in our fullness. That's the prize. The prize is to be a full human being. Not to be perfect, because I don't think there's an upper level of how far we can grow. You know, there's no written threshold. It's not like the bar in the high jump, you know. We can just continue to evolve and grow our entire lives. But to have that sense of that the foundation is strong inside makes all the other things flow more easily. It makes you more willing to risk, to raise your voice, or to write the book that you've always wanted to write, or to say, you know, I'm good at that, and I think I could teach it and not be afraid, or to organize people in a way that you didn't think you could do. You have that. You have tens of thousands of generations of brilliance inside of you. And so this course is really about peeling away that which impedes you, healing the bits that need to be healed, and in that process gathering spiritual allies that you can have with you for the rest of your lives. So let's see what else we have in terms of questions here. Find my place on the paper. Well, this was a simple one. Is this course for me? Somebody actually asked that question. Well, I don't know you, but I can say this course is for any human being who wants to live their lives with more fullness. You know, we all have the places inside of ourselves that are like unopened presents. And because they're unopened presents, we're not sure that what's inside, and maybe we don't want to open them. You know, we might rattle them, go, I don't know. But I guarantee, because you have hundreds of thousands of generations in your DNA, in your body, of brilliance, of innovation, of creativity, of strength, all of that, you can step into this work and feel stronger. We just got a question come burbling up here. And let's see what that is. Here we go. And here's a question. Thank you, Pamela. Is there any prerequisite for this course? And I answered that a little bit earlier, but I can say no, there is no prerequisite necessary. Anything that we'll be doing in the course, I will support you in terms of guiding the ceremonies, guiding the journeys, and you can jump in this feeling as green as a newborn colt. It's about me supporting you to get this wisdom and guidance and healing from these spirits. And the spirits that we'll be working with are really aspects of a much, much older idea of the sacred feminine. You have to understand, for 38,000 years, we made images of what I call the little fat grandmas, you know, the Venus of Willendorf. And they are images of an older woman who has a body that has clearly seen many pregnancies. It's an image of fruitfulness. It's an image of some of the quality of a good grandma, that you will be okay. I have wisdom and you will be okay. So as Indo-European tribes moved in from the east, I'm sorry, they moved towards the west into Europe, because these traditions that I'm working with happen to be European, but the archetypes really you can see in all other cultures. I'm just using the names that are most familiar to me. As the patriarchal tribes moved, due to climate change, by the way, moved westward into Europe, they brought their culture with them. And they were pantheistic, and they had a sky god. And so the singular Mother Earth kind of goddess, that mother, grandmother goddess, became many goddesses. And what I love in working with the archetypes as they are, these goddesses in the Norse pantheon, is they retain that sense of primordial wildness. And I'm not to say that they're crude or uncivilized. I don't mean that. But that sense of wildness, that sense of nature has that kind of wildness. It is incredibly fruitful. It is resilient. It is wise. And it doesn't take guff from anybody. That is the energy that these goddesses have. They have, each one has a kind of specialty that we'll be working with over the 9 weeks. And you'll be introduced to them all along the way. You'll get a sense of who they are, what their specialty is, and how you can work with them. So again, you don't need any prerequisite for this class except a kind of openness, that you're ready to have an adventure that can result in some healing of the sacred feminine inside of you. And I also want to take a minute to speak to the men, because there are men registered for this class, and I honor you for that, because it takes, as some people say, a good set of brass ones to own your sacred feminine when you're a man. You will meet these beings who will support you to open up and become more comfortable with the aspects of you that were diminished when the sacred feminine was diminished. Because men have suffered under patriarchy differently, certainly, than women, but they have suffered as well. They have suffered in that they have a very narrow range of what they're allowed to feel. You know, we have lots of feelings as human beings, but it's not cool for men to experience all of them. They get the eyebrow, even when they're little kids, you know, about suck it up, walk it off, all those kind of messages. So that diminishes the ability to also process feeling. If you're told not to experience them, then you haven't been able to have experience in processing them, and it can be overwhelming, so much so that you want to shut down. It sometimes makes relationship difficult when you don't have that fullness, that you've been limited to a certain role. And this is particularly difficult for those of you who are sensitive men, who find the current role model for masculinity is one of sort of a hyper, almost cartoon-like masculinity. You know, sort of comic book kind of masculinity that doesn't have a range of humanity as part of its experience. And most people don't look like superheroes. That is really important, that you as you are, and now I'll speak to both, all genders, not just men and women, but those of you who refer to yourself in the plural or who choose some other way to express your gender. Everyone needs to open up this aspect to experience the full breadth of who you are as a human being. Your humanness is something that is precious, because humans are capable of so much more than we're experiencing right now. You know, we intellectually think of it because we named ourselves, we named our species Homo sapiens sapiens. That's wise human. And we look anything but wise mostly right now. So we have this tremendous breadth and depth that I think many of us are longing to experience. Certainly the people we see in our private practice, they want to feel the deep roots that they have. They want to feel the breadth and depth. They want to feel brave to be themselves. then I want you to feel brave to be yourself. Imagine if everybody felt comfortable inside their own skin. They wouldn't have to pick on anybody else. They wouldn't have to diminish someone else to feel powerful. And so when I talk about the sacred feminine and healing that, we're really trying to heal colonialism, racism, misogyny, homophobia. All those isms are tied together in that sense of unspoken inner weakness, that unspoken inner fragility that has people look outside of themselves to blame someone for their condition or to somehow diminish someone else in order to feel that they themselves are powerful. So this has a wide range of things that it can affect. And again, it starts right here, inside of our own skins, working with the spirits that love us. And in this community, I hope that you'll interact on the Facebook page and ask questions. I'm going to be on there every Friday so we can have some time together, and I will answer your questions during the week as well. I want to be supportive of you because I know this is so important. If we're going to unravel all the ills in our culture, we have to unravel them inside of ourselves and bring that sense of harmony and balance back inside of our own skin. And I'm just reading a response to that there's a woman who has said she has a good, strong masculine core as well, and she thanks me for that, including the men as well. And it is necessary as a culture to heal what has gone wrong culturally. All of us are at the effect of the culture. All ages, all genders, all colors, all religions, we are all experiencing what's gone wrong in the culture. Our culture exploits the planet in the same way that it has exploited people. It has exploited land as well. It's the same mindset, and it comes from that broken place, that diminished place inside of us. And our planet is saying, that has got to stop. And yes, we can take actions out in the world, and we have to do that. But when they come from that place of feeling strong and empowered and full inside of ourselves, they come with much more power. They come with a clarity and intent that is razor clear without having to leap over the barrier of our insecurity. Because again, people in power hear that. Because there's a predatory quality to people in power in a patriarchy, because it's about power as force, not power as energy. And so that those that have taken power look for the vulnerable places where they can gain an upper hand. And I guarantee you've experienced this in your life in one form or another in interactions with somebody in authority. They can perceive that wobbly place inside. And when you no longer have the wobbly place, it's a different story. It's a completely different story. You don't have to raise your voice to be heard. Your voice comes out in a different way. Your intent comes out in a different way. You have no need to have that hesitation before you come forward. That hesitation goes away because you have this sense of your deep roots, and you have more security inside of yourself so that you can manifest who you have come to be. You had lots of opportunities as a soul to just hang out there and kind of like, maybe I'll skip this incarnation. But you came into a form. You came again to be in the physical world, to experience a nervous system, to experience separation, and to somehow reclaim it in a physical body. You came here again to do this. And you came at this particular time when you were needed. We are needed, all of us, we are needed now. And we can be present, and we can do what needs to be done when it flows from that sense of fullness and clarity in ourselves. So I'm doing a lot of teaching instead of answering questions, but it feels right to do that, because all of these things fit together. Our insecurities come all from the same place. The places that we see abuses out in our culture come from the same place. You know, if you think about things like human trafficking or pedophilia, where someone is not capable of having a relationship with someone their own age range. They have to prey upon someone weaker, or prey upon someone from a different culture who doesn't speak English. That's all part of that power struggle of what needs to be attended to. I keep seeing all of these ills woven together. There's roots to all of them, and the roots are far more similar. They're about making those changes inside of the self. So you have no need to try to one-up someone in order to feel powerful. You have no need to be the goat, the sacrificial lamb. You have no need for that, because you were not written. That code is not written into you. That's just enculturation. And to be able to live your life in that fullness is to see you do that is my passion. That's my passion, to support you and everyone that comes into our private practice and people that I teach through my books. I want you to awaken to who you really, really are. Who you really are. You're very powerful. There's just a lot of clutter in the way. And the clutter can be cleared a lot faster than you imagine when you set your mind to working on it and with support. And meeting these goddesses, these archetypes, is going to be actually fun, because some of them are quite wild characters. I can tell you there's one that is this enormously strong goddess. She's so strong. She doesn't hang around much in the myths. She's in the background. But the gods had this tremendous task to do, which is to push this great burial ship out that held one of the gods. And nobody could do it. None of the other gods were strong enough to push it out. And of course, they couldn't do the burial out at sea they wanted to push it out to sea. And they all tried and nobody could do it. And so they knew who to call. They don't call her very often, but they called Hyrrokin. Hyrrokin came riding from the place where the troll women live, the most wild goddesses. And she came riding a giant wolf, and her reins were poisonous snakes. And she came riding up in her fullness, and she lifted the boat and pushed it out. So when we need strength, Hyrrokin is our ally. And so all of these different beings can support different aspects of where we need the support. I'm just laughing because I have an ordinary reality question that came in, like, where did I get my shawl? I actually got this in a shop in Portland, Oregon, probably a decade ago. And who made it and why it was made, I have no idea. But I tried it on, I loved it, and it's kind of my presentation shawl now. So it's wool and it's got embroidery. And I'm glad you like it. So if you have any other questions, key them in, because we only have a few more. Hyrrokin, somebody's asked. It's, I have to close my eyes. It's Herrokkin, Hyrrokin. And there's, just 2 or 3 lines about her in the sagas. But she's quite the character. And there'll be other ones like that. Most of the ones we'll be working with are also giantesses. And giantess is the code word in Indo-European traditions for those that came before our gods. So they are really old archetypes. That's somebody else asking. I'm going to type Hirokin in there. Hirokin is her name. Boop. There you go. All in caps. Sorry about the caps. So you will have all of these allies that you'll be able to work with in your life for the ordinary reality stuff. Like there's times when you are just tapped out, and imagine being able to call on Hirokin when it's like, I gotta have that extra boost, Hirokin, and I'm exhausted, this has to be done, I have to take care of this and so. That is important, and not just one of those little we think is important, but somebody really needs that support. Then they want to do that. We ask for the help from Hirokin, and there'll be others like that. So an anonymous attendee has said, I've been told only to connect with healed ancestors. That one's easy. When you intend to connect, you simply say, I invite all my healed ancestors to support me. There are far more ancestors that have their stuff together. I'll try not to swear, They have tremendous love. Those that have passed into the light become pure love and pure support. And so what I sometimes say is my transcendent ancestors. But really, they didn't get those instructions in the European Psychological Association. All they were told to do is think about ancestors. So yes, you're liable to get more refined support from the healed ancestors, but truthfully, all of your ancestors can be helpful. They live in your body. Put them to work. They live in your cells. Put them to work. We can use all the help we can get. Okay, do you teach about the archetype and not just specific goddesses? I'm working with the Norse pantheon, and there are parallels in other cultures. So I'm using specifically Norse names for these beings, but you can see, particularly in the Hindu tradition, there are a lot of parallels with the Norse. You can see parallels in the Greek and Roman pantheons as well. All those Indo-European or Indo-Aryan cultures, there are similarities. I will use the Norse names for these characters because while there's some overlap, there's some differences. And I use the Norse simply because that's my heritage. But those goddesses are doorways to archetypes that are available to all of us. You don't have to be Norse. You don't have to be Norwegian. You don't have to be Germanic. None of that. These are available to us. I think of the myths that we have in our collective as pieces of information that our ancestors wanted us to remember. So there are morality plays in there. There are teaching stories in there. There's information that, while it's couched in the language of the time, is useful for us to know. It's useful for us to have. So myths you can think of as something put in, like messages in a bottle thrown into the ocean of time, so that we can reap that now when we need it. So that, it's my idea that if you studied the myths of people all around the world, each one of them has preserved pieces that we need. And some of them are very specific to where they live. If you live on a tiny little atoll somewhere, your experience of the world is certainly going to be different than living in an alpine area. But the fundamental truths of what it means to be human, what it means to feel vulnerable, what it means to be heroic, what it means to be strong in the face of your own terror, what it means to be compassionate, what it means to reach across to someone or some being that feels so different than you are, what it means to moderate how you are in terms of when you are engaging with someone, so that you don't have to step into conflict, that you can work on developing a way to be cohesive. You know, those are things that are taught in myths, and they're global. Our ancestors have been trying to teach us this stuff for a long time. And it is my sense that now, because we have made, frankly, a real mess of things, certainly environmentally, that we have to harness all of the wisdom that's there for us to work with. So that's the ancestral wisdom, is where the myths come from. And then we also have to work with the wisdom that extends beyond us, where the spirits of nature and the spirits in the upper worlds and the middle worlds and the lower worlds of spirit can support us to be the best versions of who we are. We need that support. And so our hour is just about over. And so we promised you a little treat. So for attending this Q&A, and I'm going to read this just so I don't mess it up. You may have felt a little shy about showing up or what have you, but we got you a present because you showed up. And it's called Repair. It's an audio file, and it's called Repairing Your Energy After Experiencing Fear or Anger, a Norse Shamanic Method. And it's an audio recording that you can get. And my friend Joshua, Joshua is going to type that into the chat, so you'll be able to find that link. So that audio is a way for you to get yourself out of when you're stuck in fear. And we had a question around being in that place of terror early on in our hour. To get us unstuck. Sometimes you can't resolve the situation, but you need to get out of fear in order to be able to get the rest of you back online. Your brain has to be online. And your brain is not online when you're in fear or anger. Anger is just one of the other faces of fear. And you need to have all of you online in order to solve a problem. So this recording is going to support you in your process, whether or not you decide to take the course. But I hope you do. And those of you who are already signed up, I'm glad that you are already starting to interact on Facebook, and I look forward to interacting with you there and during our course time. And so I'd like us all to take a collective breath, because that was a lot of talking. And bless you for listening. So let's take a collective breath, all of our hearts, all of us here coming together, taking a breath together, focusing on creating harmony inside of ourselves so that we can be better stewards of this planet and kinder to one another, and to live up to the magnificence that we were meant to express in this lifetime. Be well, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.